Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. This is the Eurel character review. Now, typical character overview, the base and total stat analysis, crit, hit, and avoid. The report card being the big culmination of all of those stats. The class and job overview, where I talk about the abilities a little more in depth and where I think they fit into the balance of the game. My general thoughts to wrap things up, and then obviously some things about the TMR review, the Esper Synergies, and the weapon optimization. But getting into things, Eurel is a brand new Earth unit. It's the first one we've had in quite some time. She does have the unique main job of Martialist, with Pugilist and Knight as the other sub-jobs. She equips Fists, Hat Cloth, and Accessory with a move of 3 and a jump of 1. She is a 90 cost unit. Now when it comes to the resistances here, a little misleading on the initial page because her mastery ability does give her upgrades to 2 of these, and if we were to put them in here, she does have 30% missile resistance and 25% slash resistance, also 10% to strike, so all around very strong to some of those very popular physical types that we're seeing. Minus 5% to pierce and the minus 10% to magic, very noteworthy there. Now she is a 50 faith unit, so you don't need to worry too much about the status element resistances, but 50% to immobilize certainly is nice given what we're seeing with Elia recently, 50% to stop, and then the 10% to charm. All of these being relatively common to what we see for a lot of characters, but I honestly don't think it's all that great, if only because when you think of stop and Dark Fina, well, Dark Fina is going to obliterate Eurel when she sees her. We're going to get into that soon. And the 10% to charm, really more Sadali's jam, and he's going to obliterate her also. So these are good resistances, but not necessarily against the matchups that you want to take. Now we look at the base stats. Overall HP is in a pretty decent starting spot here, where she does end up a little bit above the average here. She does have some nice bulk on her as a DPS. It's not her forte, but it's definitely one of her strengths. Now from an attack perspective, definitely on the lower tier side of things, just in terms of what we've gotten recently for a lot of these attack values. And I'm kind of critical of this because as a strike damage unit, you really do want to see some higher innate attack values because they don't always get the same access to modifiers that other characters do. So you really do have to rely on that primary stat in a lot of instances. So overall attack, definitely a little bit below what we get from most modern newly released DPS. From an agility perspective, basically average, nothing terribly wrong here for the base agility. She doesn't end up being a very fast unit, as we'll see later on, but for the base, it's acceptable. From a dexterity perspective, definitely skews a little bit higher here to start, but does kind of lose some ground on the board, which we'll see soon enough, but overall base dexterity relatively good. And then luck, pretty much average, maybe just a smidge above average, but nothing too crazy. And all in all, you can see she's no real weaknesses, but no real strengths either per se. When we kind of translate those 5 graphs into this one right here, you can see she's kind of in the middle of the pack for almost all of these attributes, if not a little bit above average, but not definitively so. And when we put in the mastery stats, the board nodes, the board stats, not much changes. Now she does actually lose and get a little bit weaker here on the dexterity and luck side, where when we look at what they give her for the board stats, they kind of jip her just a little bit for the dexterity and luck, so she does fall relative weaker to most other characters. And from the board agility perspective, they gave her 6 extra agility points, which is kind of like the very bottom of what the average is from any unit. So they didn't really do a lot to kind of buffer any stats with the board. So she ends up in this kind of like, good but not great place. And it's kind of sad to see the attack stat kind of as low as it is, again, just given she's a strike type damage unit. But all is not lost. There are some redeeming factors. We're going to talk about that. Now, the crit and crit avoid, as you see with the dexterity stat, kind of in that middle of the average. She actually does have some board critical hit stats for 16% extra critical hit, which ends up bumping this up a little bit above where the pure dexterity stat would lead you to believe. So she does have some decent chance to hit some critical hits here. From a crit avoid perspective, definitely below average. Not the end of the world, but for a character that does pride itself on being a little bulkier, you would like to see this ordinarily just a little bit higher, but I don't think it really drastically changes her survivability or what she should be good against. Now we look at the accuracy overall. This chart, a little bit misleading. So this blue line here is the innate total accuracy without any passives or anything, and she is definitely on the lower side of things, if not just a little bit below the average. And although once you start equipping passives and taking those into account, she does kind of ratchet up the chart here, but this is misleading because that passive that gives her the 20 accuracy, I actually don't think it's a very good passive. So although it might look like she can be relatively accurate, if you were to not have that passive on, if you see where my cursor is on this green line, she still ends up being very low on the total potential accuracy. So definitely a weakness that does have some asterisk on it. We'll see in the report card here in just a second. Now from an evasion perspective, definitely not an evade unit, very, very low on the overall evasion rating, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. And we get to the report card. Starting with the effective HP here, I'm going with a C+. She does have a high enough health pool relative to other DPS that it does skew just a smidge higher. And she does have good enough resistances, as we saw, to the slash and missile damage. The only problem with that is there's a ton of penetration for both slash and missile types, so it's a little misleading just how potent those are, because they really are effectively lower than what they might lead you to believe, given how strong some of the penetration types are for those types. Now, from a physical perspective, rounding up a little bit here to a B, she does have some innate defense. She does skew more favorably toward the physical attacks. At magic HP, I'm going a D here. Not only is it the minus 10% magic resistance, but when we look at the innate defense and spirit, she at least has the 8 defense, but no innate spirit. So magic-wise, she is most definitely susceptible. She does have courage within her kit, so that's at least another aspect of her survivability, but nothing too crazy. I think C+ is pretty fair for overall effective HP. Now, from a primary stat, going C+ here, I probably could go maybe a little higher. And I say that because the stat recovers a little bit from one of her passive abilities that will increase her attack, so it's not the end of the world. But as I mentioned, strike modifiers are tough to come by, but you can get up to 90 defense penetration pretty easily with one of her offensive abilities, so it's really more matchup dependent on where she maxes her damage out at. From an agility perspective, C+ here, but that's including a 12% agility passive. Without it, she's actually kind of like a C- or a D, and a little bit below where the average ends up in the total scheme of where characters can potentially go. So the agility, definitely want to keep an eye on. Accuracy-wise, I'm going to C with the asterisk. As we saw, not terribly innately accurate, no guaranteed hit in the kit to compensate for that, but her weapon does compensate quite a bit in terms of accuracy points. And although not a great passive to equip to help the accuracy, she does have 25 accuracy on a buff. The consistency of getting that buff off perfectly goes up for question, though, so there are ways to recover from that, but definitely not something she's really known for. From an evasion perspective, going with a D here. Yeah, if you're going against a team that's not accurate at all, and you're running her in a hyper evade comp with like Zazan and Ketone, and you have the Titan Vision card and double luck vision cards, maybe she'll dodge a hit, but that's really because the team you're going against is really inaccurate, not because she's an evade unit. So she's not an evade unit, she's getting a D here. And from a movement perspective, going with a B, she does have access to move +1 on a passive, so thumbs up there. From a passive perspective, I'm actually going with a C. The passives, in terms of attributes and what they bring, are pretty average, in my opinion, are the kind that would get power crept as the game goes on, but she will benefit greatly from a future night buff that will change one of the passives on paper, but in practice, you'll see I actually don't even think that night buff makes that passive that much better than what she has alternatively. We'll talk about that in just another minute. And from a counter ability, I'm going a B+ here. She has a physical reflex, which is great, but there's obviously a lot of reduction in counter chance here, so the reflex is not as overpowering as it used to be. The overall kit, I'm going with a B+. There's actually some good abilities in the kit that I like a lot as it pertains to what she brings to the Earth cast, and just some overall uniqueness. But there are definitely a ton of weaknesses in the kit. I'm probably being a smidge generous with the B+ here. But the final grade, I think, kind of compensates for that. I'm going a B- overall. She just ends up being kind of niche, and it's not to say she's a bad character. She's a good step in the right direction for Earth in terms of bringing something a little bit new and unique to them. But her applicability and usage in the game is definitely limited to only a couple of situations. Now we look at the passive abilities here. Martialist lore, I'm going to have on 100% of the time. That's the attack 24% and the defense penetration 40. So this is a really nice offensive buff for her overall. When it comes to my second favorite one here, I think it's battlefield mobility. That's the agility of 12% and the move +1. I think the mobility is really nice. Flurry enhancement is the one that I'm talking about here with the 20 accuracy that I think is really not a good passive. Flurry counter is not a good counter ability, so having this passive on really does hurt you. And the only other potential alternative ones I might think about here is the Divine Protection once they get the Knight upgrades, and Warrior Spirit does have a time and place here too, where if you want to go for that extra bulk and extra attack, I like this a lot. Divine Protection at least gives you the 12 AoE resistance though, so it's a different kind of durability. Although 15 debuff resistance is nice, unless you're stacking that with 25% Trust Stone passives on all of them, which is not very economical. Overall, the Divine Protection ends up just not being as good as Battlefield Mobility or Warrior Spirit. And although HP up level 1 does give slash penetration of 40%, I really don't think you're going to lean into the slash type attacks at all. Now, from a counter ability perspective, I mean, it's got to be fluidity, right? Where it's a physical reflex, preemptive, only 15% chance to proc. Sword Guard, I like the concept of it, of the 30% damage reduction. I just don't think 20% chance is high enough to really get maximum value out of when you consider it's only 5% more than fluidity. So I like fluidity a lot more. Now, from the main job, the buff perspective, Indomitable Stances is her courage ability. It's also 20 AP regenerated itself. So all in all, when you figure you get 14 AP from using the TP cast of this, plus the 20, 34 AP off this ability overall, really, really great. It is second priority though to Fatal Oath which I do like this buff, but this is one where she will run in circles to cast it on all teammates, so you have to be really smart with the AI. This can hurt you a lot of times. This actually grants a really unique buff to her and her teammates where it's Dispel Courage for 3 turns for herself and teammates. Also grants her that 25 accuracy to self that I mentioned earlier. It's nice that it has an AoE height of 1, so some of those Guild War maps where you start off in like maybe a little hole 1 level below, she can still cast it on teammates. But I love this from the concept of what we're seeing now from characters like Snow and Dark Leela, where they get that HP restore when they hit their courage, that if you can just dispel courage, then they never get to really regenerate that health, or at least with far less frequency. So I do like the buff. It is a little harder to get down perfectly. Now we get into the main job here. Hammer Fist here, not a bad ability, and I'm going to bring up the heights and ranges here, but it's a single square attack, so the range is obviously very limited. It's why I like the move +1 just to make sure she's always in range to do something here. Decreased agility of 20% is cool, nothing wrong with that. 3-step Star Strike is another decent one where it's move unit to the target panel, reduces their counter chance by 100. Modifier wise, not bad. It is a triple hit, so this does have some nice range on it, being 4 squares away, being able to jump and close the distance there. But overall, not the worst ability. These are both single unit attacks, and the next two are AoE attacks, so she does have a nice balance there of what she can use. Rend to the Heavens is the one that gives her 40 defense penetration for 3 turns. It's this nice cross-shaped AoE, but it is dependent upon people being in a straight line of you. It's kind of forgiving with the range height of 1 and the AoE height of 1. The biggest thing here is the increased modifier of 60% if the enemy has certain conditions. So you go from 165 to 225% modifier, which is definitely potent if the enemy has defense up, that's what this defense stands for, auto restore or AP restore, and haste, which are all 3 really common things you see. So I actually like the utility of the damage upside on this ability based upon those status effects that the enemy has, because they are pretty common. And then finally, Fist of Penetration is this nice like AoE right in front of her where she just blows everything away. That's a break physical barrier for all of those targets. So I like the fact that it's kind of an AoE barrier break. But again, only 165% modifier. Nothing too crazy. 32 AP, maybe a smidge expensive, but overall not so bad. She doesn't have the worst AP management issues, as we'll see in a second, because of her limit break as well. Now, the Martialist Subjob, this one is okay. Rising Calamity here, the decreased AP for targets, is a nice little piece of utility. It's a nice that she has kind of a secondary AoE attack, but again, it's only 1 square away. It's the same modifier, so it's not like it's extra damage. Good, but not great. Power Stance is fair. I don't know if I love it though. I like that it's some access to attack 60%, but she's already so weak to magic. I would only have this equipped is if you have no threat of magic whatsoever. But she's already so weak to magic, this basically ensures that you're going to get demolished by an enemy magic user. So it's one of those ones that's kind of like, you're going to die anyway because you're already weak. You might as well make yourself stronger and try to kill them faster. So Power Stance is not the worst buff. It's nice that she has access to a 3rd one, but there's some limitations to this, obviously. Now we look at the Pugilist Subjob. I'm actually not a fan of this at all. I don't think the subjob is really all that great, and I say that from the perspective that it doesn't really do anything that her main job doesn't already do. Shifting Strike, she's already got a shift attack. Yes, Spirit Breaker and Demon Purger are technically higher modifiers here, but that's almost why I don't like it, because if your AI is going to prioritize the Pugilist abilities, it's like, well, what's really the point of the main job abilities? You're basically just a Pugilist at that point, and from experience, this job just like doesn't really have high impact in the game. So it's okay, but nothing crazy. Demon Purger will in the future get an upgrade when they buff the Pugilist job that will also absorb 30% of the damage done, so that's nice, but again, not terribly unique in the game. Now the 3rd job here is the Knight Subjob. This one historically has probably been best for PvE content. The problem that I have with the Knight is that it's super close range, which isn't necessarily a problem for her because she already wants to be close range anyway, so it's not really a big AI departure from what you want to do with her. But overall, if you're looking at the modifiers here, like they're all really low. This job is getting a buff in the future where Divine Healing does change so that it gives elemental debuff resistance and increases healing power 30, and Trinity Break is getting a reduction in its AP. I just don't see this being a very overpowering subjob though. Now when we look at the limit break here, decent enough range on this, having that range of 4, dispels all buffs, dispels haste, and grants her 5% AP auto restore for 3 turns, so it is a nice way for her to sustain some damage uptime and not have to worry about any AP generating TMRs. Overall, this is a thumbs up. This is a good limit break, and I'm going to talk a little more about why in the general thoughts. Now we look at the mastery ability. I actually kind of hate this. I hate these mastery abilities that give just the resistances, because I can understand on an MA2 when you're trying to buff a character, you throw the resistances in here because they didn't already exist. But this character is brand new to the game. If you wanted them to have 25 and 30% resistances, just make them have 25 and 30% resistances. I don't know why you have to waste the mastery ability slots for it. It actually hurts her because of it. Now for the TMR review, this actually is a very good TMR. There's obviously a lot of really great stats on here for the cloth of the 12 12 defense, the accuracy, the crit rate, just to kind of like balance things out. The ability, though, really is good, where you can move to a teammate, buff them directly, where they'll absorb 30% of the damage that they do. There are 2 casts on here, so that's consistent with the modern TMRs that we see. The biggest thing about this, though, that I didn't realize initially, it's non-dispellable. That's extremely important, that you cannot dispel this buff with the conventional just dispel ability. So the fact that the only counterplay to this is healing power down actually does give it some good value. This is a good character to pull, if only for the TMR. I do see some really good potential usages out of this in the future, where you don't have to rely on a healer to regenerate some health. You can simply use this TMR to do so. Now we get into the general thoughts to kind of finish things off here. Good Earth unit for the new iterative version of the Earth element. I say that because Earth for so long was very one-dimensional into what its profile was. It was high evade, speedy, unit attack-oriented units with Immortals Azon, Ketone, Halloween Fred. They didn't have a very strong magic presence. Luel and Kilf were fine for a little while, but nothing great. But they finally came out with Queen Mashri, adding to the new iterative version of Earth. Oberon obviously has a very unique profile and is a very strong character, and Noctis is as well. But I like her because it's the kind of character that may not be great right now, but as the game continues to change and the elements get more diverse, she's definitely going to benefit more by giving a different kind of attribute to what the Earth element potentially brings. Now, really elevated by her Vision card, but speaking frankly, the Vision card isn't all that great. I'll probably do a different video on this. But to be fair, the Vision card is really good for her. It does a lot of really good things to make her a lot better. So just keep that in mind when I kind of diss her throughout the presentation here. Great courage interactions. I like the fact that she has courage. She can dispel courage herself and can give a teammate the ability to do it. That's very, very powerful in my opinion, where even if she can't hit those high accuracy units, if she can give Oberon the ability to dispel courage and he uses guaranteed hit on a hyper evade Elena, that's cool. That's a lot of value. I really like that a lot. Really great at cleaving through high defense tanks. That's definitely part of her motif here with the potential 90 defense penetration. Great addition to the Earth cast to add a dispel function. That's why I like her limit break, because none of the other Earth characters, or at least none of the good ones, have any kind of dispel in their kit. So the fact that you finally have an Earth character that does give some relative strength to that element. So big thumbs up from that perspective. Subjobs really do leave a lot to be desired, though. The Pugilist job just isn't that great in this game. It's fine, it's just not great. The Knight is kind of the same idea. It's maybe got some PvE usage, but on that note, she doesn't really add much to the PvE experience, in my opinion, because Earth is so good at it already. Agility down, a bunch of characters already have it. She doesn't have any imperils. Yes, she has a triple hit, but so don't like almost all the Earth casts with their ninja subjobs. So on paper, could help with PvE, but I don't think she does anything that doesn't already exist with the Earth from a PvE perspective. Now we talk about the Esper Synergies here, just who you should start resonating with her immediately. Obviously, Chaos Odin and regular Odin are always the de facto ones here, with their resistances, the human killer being applicable to all types of damage, so her strike attacks will benefit from this. But some of my other highly recommended ones, I love Titan as an Esper, because not only does it give her Earth attack up, but it does address 2 of her weaknesses by giving her spirit and accuracy as well. It's not a game changer, but it is a really nice one that does give her everything she needs plus things that she wants. I also do think Golem is a decent one too when you're talking about countering those high physical damage teams, where it gives her the defense, gives her the Earth attack up, gives her human killer as well. Plus does have that pierce resistance, so it brings her from that -5 to potentially positive pierce resistance. Do think that's a good thing. And then finally, I think Elphicaris is a decent one. The board isn't perfect, but at least has Earth attack up. It does have another good one that I can't remember what it was. Might be crit damage or crit rate, but I like this one just for the agility, where if you do want to, keep Odin or Chaos Odin on someone else and still retain some high agility, Elphicaris is an option. Not that there aren't other good Espers either. They're just more oriented on the matchup and what resistances they give you as opposed to modifiers. These are really the ones with the best modifiers to look for. Now, from a weapon optimization, definitely the Martialist Fist Guard. There isn't even another weapon that's close to remotely good for her. I am probably going with the aim build, quite honestly, in this. The assault's not bad, but her aim being not as great as it is, the fact that you get 20 accuracy on the aim version, plus you get 15 accuracy on the board nodes for an extra 35% is material. That's a really good amount of accuracy. Still gives her strike attack 15, reduces enemy counter chance by 30%, and a special ability that I think this is what it is. It's CT up of 200 when your HP falls below 20%. I think that's what that is. It will only proc once, it won't proc continually, but because she has courage, it is pretty nice. It functions kind of similar to the re-raise utility we see with Queen Mashari and Zazan, where when they re-raise, they get CT. It's kind of the same idea here that when the HP falls below and she hits her courage at 1 HP, she'll likely immediately get that 200 CT back. So overall, this is a really good weapon for her. Definitely allows her some extra Trust Stone passives to be used since there's so much already here on the board part of it. And that's the Eurel character review in a nutshell. Again, not a bad character, just very situational, doesn't apply really well to a lot of metas, is a good step in the right direction for Earth for giving them some more diversification and offering them a couple things that they don't already have themselves, but overall, not a real big impact to the game, really not going to change a whole lot in terms of matchups. I've done some testing with her against the ice missile comps. She actually doesn't do as well as I would have thought, given how much penetration they have from a missile perspective. I think it's just going to be a character that shuts down lightning as an element even harder when they rely on their missile attacks, but Earth sort of already have no problem doing that anyway, so not a big value add. But that's the character review in a nutshell for now. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll talk to you all soon.